A defiant leader clings on to power as his forces gain ground against the armed opposition groups in Libya. While protesters urge international intervention, the US urges the UN Security Council to think beyond the no-fly zone. Can the opposition survive the diplomatic talk? Is it too late for a no-fly zone over Libya? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to Inside Story. I'm Sami Zaidan. Well, it's been a month since the uprising in Libya first began. Well, now the defiant leader, Muammar Gaddafi, says a decisive battle will end it sooner rather than later. Well, anti-government forces are slowly losing control of the territories they had initially managed to secure. Most of them are average citizens taking up arms against the well-trained and heavily armed forces of Qaddafi. Well, as the situation on the ground remains tense and fluid, the UN Security Council meets to discuss solutions to that precarious situation. Well, over the weeks, UN members have been considering a range of actions, including a no-fly zone and military intervention. Well, Qaddafi's son, Saif says any UN decision is now too late. Speaking in a more defiant tone was the man himself, the key figure at the centre of all the Libyan uprising.
We have decided to stand and defeat. Whatever they plot against us, we are going to stand against it. We are going to destroy them. The whole Libyan population should stand and fight the imperialist powers. We have defeated them first. We have defeated them before, and we will defeat them another time.
Well, joining me now are our three guests from the eastern Libyan city of Benghazi. We have Abdelkader Al-Janyan. He's a Libyan activist, been involved in the protest movement for a while now. From Cambridge, George Joffe, a professor of politics and international studies, specialising in North Africa at Cambridge University. From Washington, D.C., Bradley Blakeman, a professor of public policy and politics at Georgetown University. Well, Blakeman was a Republican strategist and former deputy assistant to President George W. Bush. Welcome to the show. Let's start with Brad. Gaddafi is gaining power. Is he going to win?
Hopefully he won't win, and with the help of the United States and a multinational force, we will prevent the genocide that's been predicted by former Libyan officials who have now taken refuge here in the United States and are seeking to help their countrymen achieve the independence and freedom they so richly deserve. You said
hopefully with the help of the US and the international community, but does it look like that help is coming?
I certainly hope that the international community will heed the cries of those people who are seeking freedom and putting their lives on the line. The United States should put their money where their mouth is, and that is to support both financially and spiritually and politically the uprising that's being taking place there. We're seeing it not only in Libya, but we're seeing it throughout North Africa and the Middle East. These regimes of familial rule are over, and the people have finally had enough. And it's up to the United States to put those principles which we so cherish and give them the same hope and opportunity as we have here in the United States.
All right, let's go to where the uprising is taking place and talk to Abdelkader. He joins us from the city of Benghazi. Can fighters hold out there?
Yes, first thank you for having me here. Yes, we have several lines of defense around Benghazi, and this will be very hard for Gaddafi and his soldiers to get into Benghazi.
But we're seeing other towns, other places around you falling. What happens if you end up as a little pocket?
Actually, here in Benghazi, no one is concerned. We make it clear and loud that we want our freedom back, and we'll fight until the last person here in Benghazi.
Is there still time, Abdelkader, for the UN to take action?
It's never too late. We hope that today they will come out and place the no-fly zone regulation so that our freedom fighter can have the upper hand and march toward Tripoli.
All right, let's go to George Joffe in the United Kingdom. Abdelkader used the words there, it's never too late. Thought that was coming to my mind is, really? It takes a while, doesn't it, to set up a no-fly zone? Is it really never too late?
Well, it of course can at some point be too late, but I think there's still considerable time in which something could be done. And it's really a technical question as to how it's going to be done. And that, of course, depends on a diplomatic decision as to who's going to do it. And I suppose that's the problem that's actually delaying any question of what should be put in place. Now, in those circumstances, European powers don't have the resources to do it effectively. The Arab world won't do it alone. So it falls back on the United States, and that really depends on the Obama administration as to whether they're really prepared to commit or not.
All right, that's a good point. Let's go back to Brad in the US. The US Ambassador Susan Rice is saying now, or kind of hinting, that a no-fly zone might not be enough and perhaps the UN needs to do more. But is that serious talk, or is that saying, well, maybe it's too late for just a no-fly zone?
Well, again, I think the professor was quite right. It's really up to the Obama administration to set a policy by which the international community can join in. Look, we have the resources, we have the assets. Even though we're stretched thin, we have 2 wars and 14 ships off the coast of Japan helping in that disaster. Certainly, if the United States is given the go-ahead as one of the lead countries because of the assets we have, we can put something together to put an effective no-fly zone, not only our own resources, but NATO resources and perhaps Middle Eastern resources to make a unified effort, as we did in Iraq, to enforce a no-fly zone. But just announcing a no-fly zone and a decision by the UN will go a long way. As the professor rightly stated, it will take a while to ramp that up to make it effective. But in the meantime, we could also make strategic strikes to air bases in order to destroy runways to make sure the planes can't take off.
What would be the point,
we amass...
Brad, what would be the point of making strategic strikes? To protect civilians, or to come out firmly and take a stand to help the opposition fighters?
Both. What you have to do is let the Libyan leaders know that the cavalry is on its way, and that we're not going to permit the genocide to take place, as is predicted and as has been reported, that they are killing their own people in droves in order to retain power. And the international community must take action. It's never too late. I agree with my friend in Libya.
Here,
it is never too late.
Brad, and bring in Professor Joffe. George, do you think that the other UN, or any of the UN for that matter, Security Council powers, really want to take sides in this conflict?
Oh, I think some certainly do. The Gaddafi regime is remarkably unpopular in the international community. It's certainly true that as far as China and Russia are concerned, there are anxieties not to get involved, but that doesn't apply to the rest of the United Nations at all. Colonel Gaddafi is unpopular in the Middle East, he's unpopular in Africa, and he's certainly unpopular in Britain and in the United States. So I think from that point of view, there'd be quite willing desires to actually become engaged. The question is how it can be done and what the wider implications of it would be.
Let's go to Benghazi once again. Mr. Abdul Qadir, the history, I guess you could say, of no-fly zones in places like Iraq and Kosovo suggests that they almost always lead to a ground force intervening of some sort. Do you think Libyans would want that?
Actually, the no-fly zone, I think, will be enough. We have enough freedom fighter on the ground to fight back, but because of the heavy airplane bombarding on these cities and multi-rocket launchers that clear the way for the soldier, clear the way for the Gaddafi soldier for these cities. So I think the no-fly zone is a must now, and it has to be done very quickly. If he come to Benghazi, it will be a big massacre here in Benghazi. Everybody.
But Mr. Abdul Qadir, I mean, it has been said that no war has been won simply by air support, and you are sort of outgunned by heavy artillery, according to your own admission.
Yes, but the way he took the ground now in these days by the aircraft and warship from the sea, that's the way he cleared the way from Bin Jawad until Jadabia. And our freedom fighter just withdrew from their position because of the heavy bombarding.
All right, if we go to Brad, looking at the lessons, I guess, of the Iraq policy in the 90s, do you think that world powers might conclude that if they are going to intervene, they have to finish the job off? There's no point in leaving a dictator in power who's sort of half wounded, especially when he has a lot of oil. Do you think that's a sort of conclusion that, or calculation that's going through the minds of those in the UN right now?
Yes, I think that it's fair to say that Gaddafi cannot just be defeated, he's got to be eliminated. And he has to be removed from that country, either dead or alive. And I think that the Libyan people want nothing less. So if we undertake this job, we've got to do it in a way to help the Libyan people help themselves. And, you know, we were massively, when we were getting our independence here in America, you know, everybody told George Washington we're vastly outnumbered, the British are far superior, and we were able, even though it was a terrible, awful battle, but we were able to overcome. And I believe, let's not give too much credit to the Gaddafi regime. I put my money on the people of Libya, and if given the proper support, I think they can attain their own freedom.
Well,
but they do need support, and they deserve it.
Calculation to be made. Let's go to George Joffe. I mean, very sensitive calculation. Say we've got to go all the way and get rid of Qaddafi, isn't it, for world powers to eliminate leaders like that, despite how unfavourable and unpopular he might be?
I agree, and I'm not certain that any power in Europe or in the United States is going to be prepared to do that. I mean, that really would involve a major intervention, the third, in fact, in recent years in the Arab world. And even though Arab support at the moment may favour a no-fly zone, I'm not certain it's going to favour European and American boots on the ground. So I don't really think, even with the United Nations mandate, there's going to be any enthusiasm for that yet. And in any case, a large part of the war so far has involved relatively small formations, and the battles themselves have been relatively small. We don't know how big the pro-Gaddafi Libyan army is inside Cyrenaica. It may be much smaller than people think. There's been a lot of dissent inside the armed forces. Colonel Gaddafi certainly doesn't have his full complement of 76,000 men available to him, and therefore, in fact, he may not be able to take Benghazi. And I suspect that that might be the outcome in the near future.
Well, let's listen to a little bit of what the Libyan leader has had to say. He's had a lot to say lately. Well, Gaddafi's been saying that the Libyan people have been helping him and that many have been forced to protest against him.
They told me, everyone was contacting me. They say they're acting against their will. They phone me and they tell me that they've been threatened by their families, threatened that they will do things to their families, to their wives, and they contact me to tell me that they are acting against their will.
I guess the son of Gaddafi probably doesn't have a lot in common, you could say, with the president of France. But one thing they do both seem to be saying, at least, is that it's a matter of hours for this conflict. Abdul Qadir, do you agree with that in Benghazi? If the world's going to act, it's only a matter of hours before it has, or the opportunity goes.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes, is it just a matter of hours now? If the world does want to act, it will have to act within just a matter of hours.
Yes, I agree with you. They have to act right now. Actually, now we hear a lot of anti-aircraft guns shot right now, and I think there is some aeroplane circulating the space right now.
So are you safe? Do we need to let you go?
No, I think it's still safe, yeah, I think. But I think the international community has to act now and right now. No-fly zone, no-drive zone, whatever they can provide, help the people, Libyan people. The Libyan people will be appreciated that, and will not forget their friends.
What sort of air intervention would you like to see, or do you think the Libyan people would like to see? Action that simply protects some of the civilian institutions, hospitals, homes, or something more active than that?
Yeah, I am not a military expert, but all people here agree that the no-fly zone, they want no-fly zone. They don't want the kids and women to be scared every night about this rumor that he will bombard Benghazi, bombard Libya. So no-fly zone
is a no-fly zone enough, freedom fighter. So, I mean, you mentioned the word no-drive zone. Where does it end?
I think, as I said, I'm not a military expert. I don't know how many freedom fighters we have. But whatever the international community can provide help the Libyan people will be appreciated. No-fly zone, no-drive zone, whatever they can help us. They have to agree and to come out with the decision as soon as possible.
George Joffe, Is this one of the few times in history where there is at least the possibility of predominantly Western air intervention, if we can call it that, in an Arab country with support from the Arab street?
Well, it would be probably the second time. Don't forget the question of the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait in 1990, 1991, when Egypt and Syria joined the multinational coalition.
But wasn't even that different, sir? There was a lot of opposition on the streets of those countries, even if their governments were supportive of it. This time it kind of feels different, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And it seems to me that there's a very widespread feeling at the level of the Arab street that something's got to be done about the Gaddafi regime. And at that level, both governments and people are united. So to that extent, any Western intervention is probably going to be much better received than it might have been otherwise. But I still think that without United Nations sanction, it will be in some sense delegitimized. So that is a first step anyway. But the real question is the degree to which Western powers are prepared to do that. And quite apart from questions of overstretch in terms of military facilities, there is really the question and the anxiety of attitudes that existed and were developed during the last decade re-emerging inside the Arab world and thus rejecting a Western participation. And I think that explains the extraordinary caution that's being demonstrated, particularly in Washington.
Is that the case? Let's take the thought then to Brad. I mean, there have been times in the not so distant history where we've seen, of course, the US and the West intervene militarily in conflicts. I won't use the word Iraq without backing from the Arab street, let alone from the UN. Why this time it does seem a little bit different, and yet Western powers are so much more reluctant? Why?
I think it's because we've gotten criticized so badly in the past by not only Arab nations but other nations who are friendly to us that our intervention was not timely nor welcome. I think they're wrong, but here in this instance, I think, if anything, we have a moral and strategic obligation to help people help themselves. We can't sit back and let genocide occur in Libya, where a Libyan madman takes revenge on his own people. This is exactly what the UN is supposed to avoid, and we, as the United States, should certainly be a willing participant to help the people help themselves. It's not as if the United States is going to go in there and win the battle for the Libyan people. It's quite the contrary. We're going to give them the opportunity to defend themselves, and that's what we should do.
All right, let's go once again to Benghazi. Abdul Qadir, now that civil society has awakened in Libya, can there be a return to life as it was before this uprising if Qaddafi is gaining, as it seems, the upper hand?
Sorry, say that again, please.
Yes, now that civil society has been awakened in Libya, can life go back to how it was before this uprising if Qaddafi wins?
No, of course no. After this bloodshed and a lot of people being killed in all city of Libya, no, it's not gonna be. I think if you're gonna come to Benghazi, I think he will have to kill all Benghazi people. So I think no, it's not gonna be the same.
Are people preparing
no.
for an alternative scenario if he does take major cities like Benghazi, as about how they carry forward their movement?
You mean if Gaddafi come back and rule us again?
Yes. Are people thinking about how they take their protest movement forward if Qaddafi does make a comeback?
Nobody thinking about this scenario. No, it's impossible.
But we've seen it happen, haven't we, in places like Zawiya?
No, in Zawiya, no people live. He's just destroyed it all. So it's so Zawiya is still an empty city right now.
All right, let's take the thought perhaps to Professor Joffe. We're talking about why perhaps the West or world powers are a little bit reluctant at this point. Why is the Arab League, on the other hand, one of the few times in its history, sort of endorsing military intervention in an Arab country? What's changed there?
Well, again, I think there are two factors. One have been the revolutions in Tunisia and in Egypt, and they've had a very powerful effect on Arab sentiment. But beyond that too, you need to bear in mind that Colonel Gaddafi achieved the almost impossible feat of making himself extremely disliked by many of his fellow Arab leaders, particularly in Saudi Arabia, but also in Egypt. And in a sense, therefore, I suspect that they feel that he has demonstrated that he is quite incapable of managing a major Arab state. And on those grounds alone, he should be removed simply because of the brutality he's shown to his population in the past. And that, I think, combined with the effect of the revolutions, has made it much easier to come to a consensus about demanding his removal from power.
All right, Brad, in the United States, do you think the US has really figured out and thought through the thought of where Gaddafi's gains might leave the momentum of revolution in the Arab world and how that sits with US interests?
Absolutely. It's certainly a major factor in anything the United States commits to do. But having said that, the Arab League must do more than just give their permission for others to act. They must step up to the plate, and they have to tell us, well, they have forces, they have assets. I would like to know what they're going to do. How many of their people are going to be involved in this? How many of their planes are they going to donate to this cause and this mission? It's not enough for them to sit back and say, don't worry about us, we're with you. No, they have to be with us on the front lines and not just be with us, supporting us morally. When we look over our shoulder, they're sitting back and not putting their own people's lives and assets on the line. They must step forward and be more active in their participation in what they're asking others to do.
All right, let's go to Abdul Qadir once again inside Libya. Is there a sense of disappointment at the reaction of the Arab world?
Reaction of the Arab world is, I think, when they meet together and declare that have to move this to the UN for no-fly zone. We appreciate that, and we are really happy. We are really disappointed from the international community. That's why it took them so long to decide for the no-fly zone. And they seen the massacre on the TV every day. That's disappointment really from the international community. What they waiting for?
But
they have to
I guess Mr. Blakeman's point was, Mr. Abdul Qadir, do you think, or do Libyans feel inside Libya that the Arab world could do more than issue those statements, could come more to the aid and use their militaries or their assets to aid the Libyan uprising more?
I think, yes, everybody is, should do more and come forward, but we don't disappointed from the Arab world, but we disappointed from the international community for why no-fly zone, which was being discussed for so long. The Arab world, they did their part, and they sent this to the international committee for the decision, and we're still waiting until now for this to happen. And we hope that today or tomorrow at the most we'll see this no-fly zone is in place.
All right, George, in the UK, what's at stake here for the world? What happens if Gaddafi does win to the whole momentum of revolution and change in the Arab world?
Well, it's undoubtedly going to make those regimes that have been resisting demands for change feel more secure in using main force to suppress them. And in a sense, I think we've seen that already in Bahrain, but we could see it elsewhere too. The Syrians, for example, will also be emboldened, and they were one of the 2 Arab countries that refused to support the resolution for the no-fly zone. The Algerians too, and indeed the Algerians have been actively helping the Qaddafi regime with support and with men. And so there I think we're going to see a rollback of the idea of revolution. It won't change the situation in Tunisia or in Egypt, which are the 2 symbols at the moment of the revolutionary process in being. But I do think it means that the idea of a domino effect throughout the region is almost certainly going to be wrong. In terms of wider issues, the Qaddafi regime is not so significant in the wider world, more significant for Europe than the United States.
All right, we are going to have to leave the discussion there. Let's thank all of our guests for joining us on this episode of Inside Story. Abdul Qadir from Benghazi, George from Cambridge, and Brad from Washington, D.C. And as always, we welcome your comments and suggestions. Feel free to email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.com. For now, it's goodbye.